Hello and welcome to Georgia Bulldogs Live here on the Voice of College Football. I am your host, Matt Green. I appreciate everyone tuning in live, everyone who's joining us this week. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. And you got something to say, feel free, jump into the live chat there and I may talk about it on the show. So, I appreciate it once again, everyone tuning in live. You can follow me on social media on Twitter at Matt_W_Green. Hit me up. I love to argue about sports with strangers. That's what we're here for. So let's get started. So normally, we're coming at you at 8 p.m., maybe 8:15. Sometimes I'll push it back. But the Georgia basketball was in action this week, and so we're gonna change things up a little bit, and let's lead the show with a little instant reaction on Georgia South Carolina basketball. So Georgia's been, I know the diehards out there. Like if I started the show at 8, the diehards were watching the Dogs play basketball, so I had to delay it for you guys. Final score: Georgia beats South Carolina 71-60. And this was just really a must-win game for Georgia. The win puts Georgia at 15-6 overall, 3-5 now in SEC play. And South Carolina was coming in with 0-7 in the conference, now 0-8. And so, it's really good to see that. That's what you needed to take care of business with like the gauntlet that the SEC is right now. Like you had to take care of a team that was at the bottom of the SEC standings. So we got some people in the live chat here. Jackson Johnson, I appreciate you tuning in as always. What's up, Bulldog Nation? I appreciate you guys tuning in. But yeah, like I was saying about the basketball team, like Georgia had lost 4 straight coming into this one. Arkansas was really the only bad loss, and that was another situation where Arkansas, that's their only win in SEC play so far. So Georgia with what they've had recently in the schedule, like it was, you lost to the number 1 team in the country by 2 at your place, Auburn, last weekend. So right now, 10 of the top 25 teams in the country are in the SEC, 3 of the top 5. So of Georgia's 10 games left to this point, 7 of those are going to come against top 25 teams. It's a brutal schedule. That's why you had to win a game like tonight. And Asa Newell, this guy's been Georgia's, most consistent scorer all year long. He has 17 and 10 down the stretch, and he was really the go-to scorer for Georgia in the second half. But I felt like the main takeaway I had in this game was just that Georgia took care of the ball like a lot better. They got a little sloppy there at the end, and South Carolina was kind of able to get it within single digits here and there. But it's they had 3 turnovers at the half, like up 35-21. Like that's been the biggest problem with this team. I would say has been taking care of the ball, or I should say turning the ball over, has been however you want to put it. That's been the Georgia's biggest problem. And the thing that I think is probably going to hold them back as the season moves along, and maybe this team gets into March and everything, is the 3-point shooting. Hasn't been that consistent. Tonight, 7 of 15 from 3, and that was consistent in both the first and second half. You had almost identical 35 in the first half, 36 in the second half, and they were also 12 of 15 from the line in tonight's game. So like I was talking about that Auburn game from a week or so ago, like I don't have the stats in front of me right now. I think they were below 50% from the free throw line, and you almost beat the number 1 team in the country shooting, less than 50% from the free throw line. So, it is what it is. It was a good win. Like they played really well in the first half. It felt like in the second half, they kind of let South Carolina keep it a little closer than it should have been. But ultimately, it was a good win for Georgia. So bracketology currently lists them as a 10 seed. Joe Lenardi is one of the last 4 buys. I'm doing air quotes for those of you listening on podcast. So I think that means they're essentially one of the last 8 teams in that. So there's the last 4 buys, the last 4 in, and then like the first 4 out, next 4 out. So Georgia essentially one of the last 8 at-large teams getting in the tournament right now. So, this was going to be kind of a heartbreaker of a loss. It might could have sent the season going in the wrong direction. So I think for that reason, it was good to get a win tonight. So that's it for the basketball on this show. We're usually talking football with you, and like Jackson Johnson, I appreciate you chiming in, sir. Tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers at Publix about the magic that Matt Green brings on Bulldogs Live Tuesday nights at the Voice of College Football. Jackson, you're a gentleman and a scholar, sir. I appreciate you tuning in here. Listen to Jackson as well. I believe he's on the Alabama channel. So yeah, I appreciate that. Let's get to the headlines this week in Georgia Bulldogs world. The clean old fashioned hate, for those of you who have not heard, it will be played on Black Friday again in 2025. And this time at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, with Georgia Tech being the quote unquote home team. And I think that's a huge win. I think I loved it last year. Obviously, this game was still too close for comfort. The 8 overtime game, if you want to call it that, it was essentially penalty kicks. We need to do something about college football overtime. Take it back to what it used to be. It was amazing. I don't know one college football fan that watched that 7 overtime game of LSU Texas A&M and was like, "We need to change the rules. We can't have this." It was an epic 7 overtime game that I'd love to see more of, frankly. But yeah, I think you look at what Georgia has been years and a single program in Georgia Tech. But I guess for like a decade plus, it was an SEC network game opposite Florida State. It's just some of those like just big time rivalry games in that final week that have just kind of overshadowed Georgia Tech. So for that reason, I like seeing it on Friday night, make it a little different. I think that's what's kind of set the Egg Bowl apart from, some of the other rivals. It's like everyone feels invested in the Egg Bowl that Thanksgiving night. So I think last year, did they make that? That was Black Friday, I think, last year, right? Did they move that? And hopefully the Egg Bowl is back on Thanksgiving night, because that's where it belongs. Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. But yeah, and A&M, I know A&M in Texas in years past was on that Black Friday. Like, I'd like to see it, but yeah, I having Georgia Tech, it was like the most watched Georgia Tech game of all time, I believe, a year ago. So I'm here for that. And doing it in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I imagine it'll be about 75% Georgia fans. I would think maybe that's Georgia Tech's logic of Georgia fans are going to take over the stadium anyway, whether it's in Bobby Dodd or down the street at Mercedes-Benz. We might as well make a little bit more money in the process. So I imagine that's where the logic is there. But man, it doesn't feel much like a home game. If you're Georgia Tech, like the literal stands are red and black. Like I don't know. That's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off for him. And then the other one, I guess this is more the rumor mill. I think it's verified news at this point, but transfer portal is not completely over. And Georgia might be adding a piece to their defensive line. They're at least trying to, with Hero Canoe, the defensive lineman out of Ohio State. He was in that 2020, I think he's a top 100 player in that 2022 class. So played in a lot of games. But wasn't one of the starters. Wasn't a real contributor for Ohio State a year ago. But yeah, I mean, I think Georgia's defensive line depth is one of the things that's really worried me. I mean, you lose guys like Mykel Williams, Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse. I'm forgetting somebody, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Like, that's going to be one of the positions of need for sure on Georgia in terms of just needing depth at that position and needing some guys that haven't emerged yet to do just that in 2025. But I think so I think he's supposed to. I think Georgia's hosting him. We're talking on Tuesday night here. I think from what I hear, I think Georgia's either hosting him today or tomorrow, and I think he wants a decision made by Thursday. So, that's a pretty quick timeline. We'll see. I know he's visited a couple other places already so far. But yeah, if Georgia was able to add an experienced defensive lineman to this inexperienced room, that'd be pretty nice. But the main position, I think that you're starting to see Kirby Smart put an emphasis on is the offensive line. I think you're seeing the offensive line recruiting ramping up in this 2026 class, and I think you look at what is the expression? The first step, not on the expression. I think this Alcoholics Anonymous thing. But isn't the first step is admitting that you have a problem, right? I believe that's how it goes. And I think Georgia offensive line recruiting has taken a step back. I mean, it's to be expected. You had Sam Pittman, the best in the game, goes on to be a head coach. Matt Luke, a former head coach in the SEC, coaching your offensive line after that. And I know a lot of Georgia fans like to disrespect Stacy Searles. I'm sure that guy is doing a hell of a job. I'm not here to call for Stacy Searles' job in any way. But I think you've seen Georgia's offensive line room take a step back. Part of it is just how elite that offensive recruiting was for a few years there. And that's not to say like that's why Georgia wasn't good in 2024. Like there's no excuse for how highly ranked these guys are. How many blue chip prospects you have on that offensive line for them to perform as poorly as they did in 2024. There were some injuries at times. It was hard to keep that same five, that cohesive group on the field for the entire season. But you just in terms of like landing that big time 5-star, like an Andrew Thomas, a Jamari Sawyer, a Broderick Jones, a Marius Mims, Isaiah Wilson, like just some of these certified, just prototype NFL offensive linemen. And you haven't gotten as many of those, I think, in recent classes. And I think it's starting to show. I think this was the worst run game in Kirby Smart's tenure as a Georgia head coach. And so one thing you'll notice about Kirby Smart is that he is very intentional. Like when he prioritizes a position, you're almost guaranteed to see results. Like it's kind of crazy how many times it's happened. But like, I mean, the first thing this guy said when he took over was that Georgia did not have a national championship level lines of scrimmage. And what do? They go out and immediately get some of those guys I just named, like an Andrew Thomas. But they immediately upgraded those positions where he declared that there was a problem. And so, a couple years ago, we have to be more explosive on offense. Hires Todd Monken. And then I think this offseason, you have to improve the wide receiver room. And then Georgia goes out and gets 2 big-time transfers as well as 2 big-time freshmen in this 2025 class. So when Kirby Smart addresses a position of like that something is a need, then I think you see results, like I said. And right now it appears that he's addressing the offensive line position. Just visited the number 1 recruit in the country in the 2026 class, Jackson Cantwell out of Missouri, offensive tackle. And according to Rusty Mansell of Dogs HQ, like 3 of the first players that Kirby visited as soon as that open period started were offensive linemen. And this 2026, I know Emmanuel Iheanacho is also the number 2 player in this class that Georgia's really after out of the state of Maryland. So unfortunately, it's not as loaded in the state of Georgia like it is some years. Georgia's going to have to go national, but this team is obviously recruited nationally for several years now. But yeah, there's like 15, 20 offensive linemen ranked in that top 100 or so group. Only 2 of those are committed in the 2026 class. So there's 8 interior offensive linemen that are all uncommitted to this point. So, it's tough in this NIL age to get players out of the state of Missouri. That's for sure. Missouri has found a way to keep those guys at home in recent years when they've had the opportunity for a big time 5-star. But yeah, it would be to see Kirby Smart and Georgia prioritizing this offensive line room. I think that tells you all you need to know, and I think we're going to see results in this 2026 class. But let's move on to the main event of the show. Um, Tonight, we're going to talk about Georgia's 2025 depth chart predictions. So I'm going to go down the line and kind of how I see Georgia's uh, starting lineup looking at each position on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So let's start first and foremost with the quarterback position. I think I think this will be a legitimate competition in the offseason. And I think Ryan Puglisi, there's a reason Georgia offered him a scholarship. Like Todd Monken, Mike Bobo, like these guys were super impressed with Ryan Puglisi, and that's why he got an offer to the state to Georgia. And also, there's something about Ryan Puglisi, the fact that he committed when Dylan Raiola was committed, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe Raiola committed and he stayed committed, and he was never deterred by that. I think that's just always a good sign in a guy. But I feel like Gunnar Stockton, just his style of play, like the kind of guy he is, maybe I'm going off narratives and everything, but driving the 1988 truck or whatever, and just kind of it feels like he kind of has the heart and soul of the team kind of thing. So I think he has the pulse of the team, if you will. So I think he's going to be a tough guy to dethrone in terms of in practice. But if we see Gunnar Stockton not performing in the game, I don't think Gunnar will be like the clear number one in terms of he comes out like, because Georgia has the 2 cupcakes to start the season and then the Tennessee game. Like, I don't think Gunnar will be such the clear number one that if he struggles in the first half of the Tennessee game, we don't see Puglisi. Like, I think it's still that open. Like, it has to be really bad, probably. But I think it's still open because, that there is this, he's had one career start in his career, so I think a little redundant there, but you get the point. So I think Gunner's just going to be a hard guy to dethrone as far as in the off season. But I think Puglisi, people really hype him up. And Jaden Rashada, that's another mini news story that I guess he's just going to be working with a coach or a trainer, and he's gonna, I guess, stay in the portal until the spring portal window opens up. But he's not with Georgia's program, I believe. I think Georgia's usually pretty cordial about that stuff, and I think they'll probably let him use the facilities and things like that. But yeah, I guess he's not with the team, but he is he's still in the portal. So won't be a decision until spring. So that's an interesting one. And then the running back position, let's stay on topic. I think Nate Frazier is the clear number one. And I think a lot of Georgia fans don't want to hear this. And I'll say what my depth chart prediction, quote unquote, I'm predicting kind of production here, and who we're going to look up at the end of the season has, the most carries and just the most snaps, that sort of thing. And Nate Frazier, I think, will be the clear number one. And I think a lot of Georgia fans might not want to hear this. I think Cash Jones is going to be number two. And he's a reliable pass blocker and a solid receiver out of the backfield. It makes you a little what's predictable when you have him in the game, because Georgia's not running that often. But I think you'll see still a good bit of Cash Jones, and he's made some plays in his own right. And then I also think with the health concerns of both of the Robinson boys, Branson Robinson and Roderick Robinson. I feel like Roderick Robinson was the one I was a little higher on coming into 2024. But these guys they've kind of shown the same. They both kind of flashed a little bit, and then unfortunately had multiple injuries slow them down in their time in Athens. So hopefully we get to see those two. Because I think after that, it's Dwight Phillips and Chauncey Bowens, guys that are pretty unproven. And then true freshman Bo Walker coming in as well. Not the highest ranked recruit, but still true freshman. And then at the wide receiver position, going off the same type of, I'm not splitting them down X, Y, slot, anything like this. I'm just going off of what I think is the production wise. And I think Noah Thomas will be Georgia's leading receiver. I think Dylan Bell, will still be that number 2 guy. If Colby Young plays, I think Colby Young could be right there with Dylan Bell. It's hard to speculate about him to this point. And I think that would be healthy for sure for Georgia's receiving room. And then I think Zachariah Branch is going to be that next option behind Dylan Bell. I think you'll see him more like in that slot role, get some of these gadget type plays. And then I think you'll see Nitro Tuggle. And then I think it's going to be a freshman after Nitro Tuggle. I think you'll see either Talon Taylor or CJ Wiley, one of those two. I think Taylor is the one I tend to get a little more excited about, but obviously the 5-star, everyone gets excited about a 5-star, but I will say, I think the tight ends are going to be heavily involved. Like now a year removed, I think we can all just be like, and seeing the rookie year Bowers has had, it's like, okay, let's just stop comparing tight ends to Bowers, but let's just appreciate them for what they are. And Oscar Delp is a very solid tight end. And I think you're going to see Delp and Lucky maybe be like the 3rd and 4th leading receivers next year. And Lucky, I'm really excited about Lucky. Like Delp feels like the traditional type of tight end. Just like the perfect kind of New England Patriots type tight end, a Ben Watson or something, just like the prototype, just solid at everything. I think Lawson Lucky feels more like this 21st century or 2020, whatever you want to call it, this decade, this time period of kind of the new era of tight ends becoming more receivers. Lawson Lucky feels more like one of those that's like a dynamic playmaker. Like I could really see Lawson Lucky breaking out and being like Georgia's 4th or 5th receiver this year. Like if that's not like a hot take, I guess 4th or 5th isn't anything crazy. But Lucky he's actually popped at times. Delp is a really solid player, but Lucky has some of that big play potential. So I'm really excited to see Lawson Lucky in another year this year. And then Elias Williams, the true freshman, is the one that I just want to see. Like Elias Williams, this guy is just a freak athlete. What is he, 6'6", I think, coming out of South Georgia. Like I really want to see this guy in a Georgia Bulldogs uniform. Oh, and Jackson Johnson chime in with the live chat. I appreciate it, Jackson. Nice little factoid here. The 2025 matchup of Georgia Tech will be the 7th time that it will not have been played on a Saturday. Yeah, and I'm here for it, man. It's Black Friday. Maybe they'll rock the black jerseys one day. I'm always hoping for it. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever get it, but yeah, I appreciate you chiming in, Jackson. But then let's go to the offensive line. So I think the offensive line is one of the biggest question marks on Georgia's team coming into 2025. And I think you'll see at the tackle spots, I think it'll be Ernest Green and Monroe Freeling. I tend to think that Freeling will be on that left side and you'll have Ernest Green on the right in that right tackle spot. I think Ernest Green is better than what we saw in 2024. You saw the guy have a really good year at the left tackle spot in 2023, and maybe he gets back to that and he's back at that left side next year. But he had some injuries at times, so who knows how many games he's playing, like not at 100%. So I tend to give him some leeway because we've seen him be good before. Those tackle spots have to be improved from a year ago. And then Bo Hughley, like this guy was a big time prospect. He kind of reminds me of that Broderick Jones. He wasn't nearly as highly ranked as Broderick Jones, but in terms of that guy that's like 280 something coming out of high school, like that's like the old school offensive line recruiting. All the dudes were like 275, 280, and you had to put pounds on them to get to 300. Now these guys Georgia's recruiting are coming out like 350 pounds, and you're getting them down to 330 to play, slimming them down to 320, 330. It's just kind of crazy. But yeah, I think you'll see. I think you'll see Bo Hughley play, and maybe he's good enough to beat one of these guys out. But I think in year 3, I think they're ready for him to make that jump. Maybe he's the kind of super sub, and Georgia kind of rotates 3 guys at those offensive tackle positions like they've done in years past. But in general, I think you want to have a cohesive 5-man unit that you're trotting out the same guys every week. So um and then looking at the left guard position, Micah Morris, he's played some starter snaps at times in his career. So Ratledge missed a lot of time last year. So there's been injuries, and I think Micah Morris is a guy you feel confident about at that left guard position. Sounds like Daniel Calhoun, even though he's a tackle coming out of high school. He was Georgia's highest ranked recruit in that 2024 class. And this guy was like a top 50 recruit, I believe, coming out of Walton, I want to say. And so this guy was big time. And so maybe he's one of those. And I always loved, like when Alabama I feel like they would always do that when they had these big time recruits. Like they'd have the stud freshman tackle playing guard. And then, once it's his time to play, once that guy moved on to the NFL, then he'd move over to tackle. So you just tackles just tend to be the best athletes. No disrespect to the guards out there. But so Daniel Calhoun, that's a redshirt freshman potentially. I think he's the one we'll see at that guard position, it sounds like. And then Drew Bobo, I think, at the center position. So I think Cortez Smith, the true freshman from Parkview, I think is a candidate to back up Bobo at the center spot. But yeah, I don't think you'll see any true freshmen maybe seeing the field unless Juan Gaston, if there's going to be a true freshman that gets in this lineup. I mean, what is this guy? I don't have it in front of me, like 6'8", 350, I want to say. Let me pull up this 2025 class here with the Georgia Bulldogs. This is what the people want. It's great radio. But you also have, Michael Uini, Marcus Easley, Nair Daniels. 2025 class, or 2024 class, I should say, is really interesting. Ranked class in the country. And so it feels kind of like the talent level at Georgia has kind of come back down to earth a little bit, if you will. But it's like if a number 1 class in the country going into their second year in college, like that, to see what some of these 2024 recruits do for Georgia. And my internet's being slow, ladies and gentlemen. So I don't want to waste more of your time. I was trying to pull up what Juan Gaston's ranking was coming out of high school, as well as what is his height and weight listed. 6'7", 365. And he was a 108th ranked recruit in the country coming out of Westlake. So yeah, I'm really excited to see that guy, especially some of the clips you saw coming out of the All-American practices this year. And this guy I think he was the MVP, offensive line MVP, one of the days during those practices. So yeah, if maybe there is a true freshman that can come in and play right away, I think Juan Gaston would probably be that guy that could get it done. Then this is on the Georgia Tech conversation. Oh, tried to pull it up here. I think seeing Georgia Tech being on Black Friday helps the clean, old-fashioned hate rivalry instead of having it on a Saturday at noon. where it has the same time as Ohio State, Michigan. Yeah, I made the exact same point actually. Yeah, that was my big thing. Like it was always a game where you have to you gotta get out the second TV, and you might even put Georgia on the smaller TV. And I know it sounds crazy, but I found myself doing that. It's like I got to keep the Georgia game on, but there's times where you got to put those big games on your big TV. So let's appreciate you chiming in the live chat. Feel free, anyone who is out there watching, chime in, and I'll answer your questions on live here on the show. But let's keep it moving to the defensive side of the ball. Same thing, same concept. I'm not here to like talk about 3 technique, 5 technique type guys. But just in terms of the defensive linemen, I think will contribute the most. I think Christian Miller was just massive to get to stay for this year. I've talked at links already about how much Georgia lost on the defensive line from the 2024 team. So to get Christian Miller to come back, I think he's going to be that biggest impact player on the defensive line. But in the middle, Xavier McLeod, I think really he's the one that really improved his play down the stretch. I was really impressed with Xavier McLeod. He was one of the better linemen in that SEC championship game against Texas. So I was really I was glad to see McLeod come back as well. And then Joseph Jonah-Ajonye, he had the injury that kept him out last season, but this guy was a top 10 player in the country in that 2024 class. And I think unfortunately we might be relying a lot on that 2024 class here in 2025, because Joseph Jonah-Ajonye is a guy who's just a freak on this defense line. I use that word too often, but I think big number 99, I want to see this guy become one of Georgia's impact players next year. Like I think we're going to see him be one of the better linemen. I think Jordan Hall is a guy Georgia fans in the country coming out, I believe in the 2023 class. He's had some injuries to this point, so we haven't really gotten to see what he can do. I think he's a candidate, as well as Justin Green from Mountain View, near my neck of the woods. I'm really excited to see him. This is one thing I say about Georgia, and I think my actual my literal comment was in reference to Malachi Starks a couple years ago, that Georgia is a team that doesn't need freshmen to contribute most years. But if they do get one to contribute, then it's just kind of a cherry on top situation. And I feel like that's what Malachi Starks was. Like, I think Georgia probably could win the national championship in 2022 without Malachi Starks playing a big role, right? Like, not to disrespect his contribution to the team, but they just didn't need a true freshman to step in right away and start every game at safety. But not one, and he was a big playmaker, and it just made their really good defense that much better. And it feels like that's kind of what Georgia is typically like. That's typically what it is. Like a Jalen Carter was a guy who's just a stud from year one back in 2020, but you didn't necessarily need him to be that guy. And so right now, I think Georgia might need one of those guys. And Elijah Griffin was #1 defensive lineman in the country coming out of high school. Oh man, who's the other one we missed on? Justice Terry, who ended up going to Texas. Like, Georgia may have needed 2 guys to come in and be, instant impact players on the defensive line, because they don't have a lot. There's not a lot of proven talent on that defensive line right now. So I think if Elijah Griffin came in and was just a star from day one and was one of Georgia's starters, I think that would be massive in terms of this team accomplishing what they want to accomplish. Because I was on here a week ago, being Debbie Downer, talking about like this most unproven Georgia team I can remember under Kirby Smart. And a week later, I see an ESPN article with the playoff prediction for 2025 or the 2026 playoff, I guess. And Georgia was the predicted #1 seed. So I don't know. Maybe there's the national people have a little more faith in Georgia than I do, but I think if that's going to happen, I think it's going to take some guys that either, weren't on this team a year ago, some transfers or some freshmen, or some guys that haven't played a big role that step into a role and just flourish with it. So Elijah Griffin, maybe he's that guy that can come along, and that's what those 5 stars are at times. They are difference makers, and Elijah Griffin, if he could come in for Georgia, that would be a big time difference maker. And then at the edge spot, I think Gabe Harris. This is the other spot that worries me. Gabe Harris, I think, is by far your most proven guy there. You lose, Michael Williams kind of played the edge spot and kind of on the defensive line, but you lose Chaz Chambliss, you lose Jalen Walker, who's kind of a hybrid as well, inside-outside guy. But those were Georgia's best pass rushers a year ago. And so Gabe Harris is definitely the most proven guy in that group. You also, Damon Wilson was one of the better edge rushers a year ago for this group. He's going to be playing for Missouri this year. And so Quintavious Johnson, he's the guy that, is just a super dynamic athlete. He's like barely played defense, or I think barely played linebacker. I think his life, he was a quarterback in high school, but this guy just a freaky athlete from what people talk about. So I'll have to find another synonym for the people on the next show. I've said that too many times already, but yeah, this is another spot that most years Georgia doesn't need a freshman to come in right away. But this might be a spot that you might need one of those freshmen to come in and be an instant impact guy. And so you look at guys like Isaiah Gibson or Chase Linton. Like, I think Chase Linton, just looking at his frame, kind of, he looks like one of those guys that probably has to put some weight on before you see him. Like, those guys tend to not be instant impact guys as freshmen. And in general, the defensive line, I don't know. Maybe it's something about the physicality that Georgia brings. Like, I just tend to not rely too much on true freshmen when it comes on those defensive line edge rusher type spots. But Georgia might need it in this 2020 on the 2025 team, because I think Gabe Harris and Quintavious Johnson are the only guys that have gotten real snap, and Quintavious Johnson probably hasn't gotten real snaps to this point. So, that's an interesting group. And then Mike 3883 chiming in the group chat, hit the like, and I endorse that. That comment, Mike. I appreciate you tuning into the live show. Feel free to tell me what's on your mind, Mike, and we can talk about it. That inside, let's keep it going with the depth chart. The inside linebacker position, CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, the most proven guys in that room. But I think you're kind of going to see another 3 linebackers play the same number of snaps. And I think in 2025, CJ Allen, Raylan Wilson, and Chris Cole will basically play the same number of snaps. And Georgia just loves to rotate guys, get the right personnel in, and just figure out a way to get the most linebackers on the field, because we've seen the way this team recruits. Like, the linebackers are consistently the highest ranked recruits on this team. So yeah, I think you're going to see the 3 of those guys really play kind of an equal number of snaps in 2025. And I think Justin Williams is that next guy that I see, being a contributor in that inside linebacker room. But I think that's by far the strongest position on Georgia's team going into 2025 is that inside linebacker room. And then you go to the cornerback spot. Dalen Everett, I think, is one of the more proven starters on this team. And then Daniel Harris kind of took control of that cornerback spot, that cornerback 2 spot in the final few games of the season. But Ellis Robinson, and everyone loves to see the 5-star, but man, this guy was just so big time coming out of high school. I really want to see Ellis Robinson get on the field and see what this guy can do. I think Daniel Harris, I think, will unfortunately be one of those guys that kind of the Quinn Ewers. It's not nearly as big time as Quinn Ewers. Everyone wants Arch Manning, sort of thing. But Ellis Robinson is the one that I definitely want to see what this guy can do. I mean, people talk about this guy going up against Jeremiah Smith in high school, and if that's the case, I want to see. Jeremiah Smith is the best receiver in college football, for my money. So I want to see what the guy looks like that is actually capable of guarding him. So maybe we get to see more of Ellis Robinson in 2025. And then I think DeMello Jones is probably that next corner that's played, a little bit, but you hear a lot about this guy in practice. So I think that's a potential right there. At the star position, I think Janelle Aguero feels like the obvious guy at that position. And then the safety spot, I think it's going to be KJ Bolden and one of the transfers. And so the transfer, is it Jaden Harris from Miami? Is it Justin Maddox? Is that his name? Am I making that up? Out of UAB, that transfer, or Zion Branch. I think you're going to see one of the starting, which I think they have said is kind of suited for that star position, more of a physical kind of safety like that. So, I think it's interesting. Let me see. Am I saying it? Adrian Maddox, Justin. I don't. Who's Justin Maddox? I'm Samsonite. But let's see here. So yeah, I think KJ Bolden and one of the transfers will be the starter. I think the other option to start in the safety room that's already at Georgia is Ja'Cory Thomas. You saw him play a little bit of that star position a year ago, but it looked like he got pulled pretty early in that Clemson game. And then you saw a lot more of Malachi Starks playing that star role, and Bolden and Dan Jackson in the safety spots. So I think Ja'Cory Thomas is an option at safety, probably not at star. But yeah, I think KJ Bolden, if there's one player on Georgia's roster that would surprise me the least if we're looking up, and a guy is a first team All-American in 2025, I think KJ Bolden is that candidate. I think I've talked a lot about how unproven this team feels in 2025, going into 2025. But there are some guys, that it would not surprise you if they took their game to the next level. And KJ Bolden is definitely one of those guys. So yeah, and if it's Maddox, Branch, or Harris, I think one of those guys will start at the other spot, and then maybe even see him in that star position. Aguero's been a guy who has had some injuries in his couple years in Athens, so hopefully he's able to stay on the field, because he looked like he was really starting to come along last season, and he made some of those plays that Tyke Smith made so well, and Javon Bullard made so well. Just were just being shot out of a cannon, and hitting some of those throws to the flat in the backfield. Like, those are the plays that excited me so much. Javon Bullard, one of my all-time favorite dogs, the star position on that 2022 team, and just call him the star in general. Defensive player of the game in both playoff games that year, and in the national championship. So Javon Bullard, all-time damn good dog for sure. But that's all I have. And then the last one, I think the leading return man on this team. Maybe punt, maybe kick. Definitely punt. I don't know. Kick return tend to be. Seems like we have running backs at that kick return spots lots of times. But we'll see who Georgia has at the kick return. But I think the leading punt returner will be Zachariah Branch. This guy looked super explosive returning punts for USC as a freshman. So I'm hoping we get to see a little more freshman Zachariah Branch than we did as a sophomore a year ago, because this guy definitely has big play potential, and he's going to be an exciting guy to watch in this Georgia offense. All right, and that is all I have, everybody. I appreciate everyone who tuned in live tonight. We come at you every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. usually. But like I said, had to bounce this one back to 9 p.m. Because of those Georgia Bulldogs basketball, and Dogs got the win over the Gamecocks. So always good to see. So like I said, everyone, I appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, please like, share, subscribe. Give me a follow at Matt_W_Green. And this has been Georgia Bulldogs Live here on the Voice of College Football. Go Dogs.